If I wasn't concerned with the outcome, but was more concerned with being in the experience, what would that open up for me? In the midst of storms hitting us, we anticipate them. And it doesn't make them any less hard, but when they happen, we're not surprised. And as we persist with our practice, now all of a sudden the difficulty becomes training. How could I approach whatever seeming game that I'm in with a fundamentally different goal? There's something infinite about being here now that isn't available if you're constantly worried about the past or freaked out about the future and trying to engineer things to win a moment. It's a very small existence. It's a very small game. It might seem like, oh gosh, one more day, but we're not trying to win our practice. We're creating a practice in order to play infinite. And in that context, these seemingly silly little daily rituals or habits are more about who we're becoming. It's about our identity. As humans, we prefer the path of least resistance. We crave convenience, the payoff without the price. But when our lives revolve around comfort, it doesn't deliver. Living in perpetual comfort leaves us weak and asleep. This podcast is an invitation to flip that script, to choose the unlikely path, to get the life you really want through voluntary discomfort. This is Strong and Awake. I'm Dane Sanders. All right, Mitch, I got a strategic question for you, man. I need an answer. I need help with this. It's an idea that's plaguing me, and I got to figure it out. So, here's the question: How do I win at marriage?
For our listeners, I wish they could have seen your face right there. Go watch the video if you're not watching it.
Now, the question is obviously a silly one, right? You can't win marriage. If you could, but you'll lose. And the idea is obvious when you consider the idea that marriage isn't the category of winning or losing. The goal actually is a little different. The goal isn't to win anything. The goal is for the game to keep playing. And yet, every game that we seem to be aware of in the world is one of these games like watching American football or something. Like there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's a winner and a loser. Recently, I was my daughter goes to Texas Christian University, and I went to one of their football games with my son. And they were winning the whole game, and the last just few minutes, they ended up losing by 1 point, but they had a chance to win at the last second, and the freshman kicker had a 57-yard field goal attempt, some really big deal for a freshman. And he had the leg, but just missed it a little off, and they ended up losing. And my thought was like, if that's the metaphor we're going to use for things like marriage or relationships, or even other categories like business. Like you might win a deal in business, but you don't win at business. Your goal in business is to perpetuate, is to keep going. So we need to create a distinction between the kind of games we play. And the good news is really smart people before us have thought of this, and it speaks directly to a core anchor that we hold at Men and Women of Discomfort, which is play infinite. And all of this comes from this guy named James Carse. Give true credit here. James Carse is a academic at NYU, or he was when he wrote this book. And he wrote a book called Finite and Infinite Games. And after that book was written, another thoughtful individual, a guy named Simon Sinek, wrote a book called The Infinite Game, which was a play on that first book, but applying it in a little different ways, in many ways popularizing it outside of the academic context for more people to access it. But it was such a helpful distinction to begin to think through finite games and infinite games, how they're very distinct. Like finite games aren't bad. They're just there is a single goal. You want to win. And if you win, everyone else loses. And when I play pickleball, it's a finite game. That's what I'm looking to do. But if I want to become a better pickleball player, that's a different game. That's an infinite game. That's a becoming game. And I would like to spend our time today chatting a little bit about these two kinds of games and the invitation to really play a game that most people aren't playing at all in life. It's almost like what we're describing here is like, what would it look like for you to play, metaphorical chess when everyone else is playing checkers? And this is a means by which you can do that in a way that promotes human flourishing, and really just a more enjoyable life. I'd love to talk about playing infinite.
I'd love to talk about that. I think to start, it would be helpful to talk about what is the goal of each distinct game?
Yeah.
My daughter does gymnastics, and she was so excited to watch the Olympics. But when my son has jumped in there and done it with her, he'll jump up on the little balance beam and then like sprint across and like, I win. I'm like, well, that's not the point of that's not how this works. It's not a race. There's different rules, or there's different goals for this event. The balance beam isn't about getting across the fastest. And I think, it's a funny example, but I do think oftentimes we play infinite games with finite game rules, or with that as our goal. And that really undermines one, kind of the whole of our lives. But it can undermine even those good finite games, and kind of create a disordered relationship with the two. So I guess all that to say, I'd love to spend a little bit more time defining, what is the goal of the infinite versus what is the goal of the finite.
So about a month ago, I was playing pickleball, which I play a lot, with my friend, and I was partners with a friend named Ryan Callahan, this amazing business leader. And we were losing, and I had missed some serves, and I was trying different ways to serve. And Ryan comes up to me at the beginning of this game after we had lost a few, and he says, okay, if you keep putting the serve in, if all you do is put the serve in, if we just kind of keep ball in play, we're going to win. And I said, I'm not really interested in that. Like, what I'm interested in is getting better at pickleball. I want to try things. I want to like experiment or whatever. And he's like, and he looked at me right in the face and he goes, I want to win. That's what I want to do. And it's almost a reverse of your question in a sense, because let's start with the games that are really familiar to us. If you're playing pickleball, play to win. If you're in the game, play to win. But let's step away from the actual game, because Ryan was right. I was wrong. I actually wrote him a few weeks later and said, hey, I'm ready to try to win now. Let's play again soon. And and I've such a bias now towards playing the infinite game that I'm missing sometimes that you to your point, you need to be on purpose with the moment you're in. And if you can win the game you're in, it's a finite game. That's the goal of a finite game. Play to win. And when you are practicing in advance of getting into that game, when you're in that kind of state of, because the goal of an infinite game is to have the game perpetuate, have the game never end. That's when it's infinite game. It doesn't end. That's when you're playing a different kind of game. So marriage, you want it to be infinite. Business, you want it to be infinite. Becoming, discovering who I am and becoming more true to what I was made to be, that whole exercise is an infinite game. Loving is an infinite game. You don't win it and you're done. You don't want it to be done ever. You want to just continue to perpetuate it. So I think that's the first distinction, is to get oriented to the game you're in. And sometimes you can, let's say I'm playing a pickleball game or whatever, and it's a drill at a practice. My goal is to, let's say, get 9 out of 10 serves or whatever the thing is, even while I'm trying to do something difficult. And I can leverage a finite game in order to get after the infinite game. So I can try to win the little drill as a mechanism to get after the infinite. But to make no mistake, my interest is not to get to a level and stop. My interest is to perpetuate forward in a way where I'm becoming more truly myself. And not just myself, but in relationship to others, to have that entity, that thing, actually perpetuate. My wife and I are now empty nesters, and all 4 kids, 2 of our kids are in college, 2 are out of college, and we have an invention to have happen right now. We have an opportunity to discover whole new terrain that we've never been in, and our goal is to really enjoy this process of being together in this new season that we've never been in, never experienced before in our lives. And that requires a real clarity around playing infinite as opposed to convincing someone or changing someone or trying to win an argument, or there's a bigger game to be played. And that's the opportunity, is to tackle the challenges that come with games that don't end, as distinct from trying to gain leverage in order to win the day or win a moment.
You see this kind of stuff in education too. Of course, I've worked at schools. My wife is an educator. My whole family's all educators, so I'm a bit biased towards that. But you see what happens when people are teaching to the test versus teaching for mastery.
Yes. Yes.
You win that finite game at the expense, oftentimes, of that infinite. Like, they're not actually becoming better thinkers. They're not actually becoming more virtuous scholars. They're becoming good at passing this specific test.
That's right.
Or regurgitating this information.
Yes.
And I think, you could point to all kinds of examples across a bunch of different domains. But this kind of shows up in a lot of different places, which I think
all over the place
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I love that educational example because what you're pointing to is there are cultural norms built in here too. There's a sense of like, I'm not going to succeed as a human if I don't get into a particular college. Well, if I don't get into how do I get into a particular college? Well, I need to game the standardized test if that's what I'm taking, or game the application process, or, whatever it is, whatever lever you can pull. And lever means leverage in order to win a moment. That's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But if it's coming at the cost of this, why are you actually trying to get into college again in the first place? Well, is it, because I want to build a network, or I want to have a great social experience for 4 years. And I get that. I'm in the midst of paying for that, for my kids. And yet my plea to my children is play a bigger game than that. Good for you. You're where you're at, doing what you're doing. And are you learning? Are you growing? Is that going to end? Are you going to stop being a learner when you get your degree? How are you learning how to learn? How are you thinking about your thinking? And these kinds of more expansive, possibility-laden activities are indicators that you're playing a different kind of game, that you're playing this infinite game. I even think of like being present, the exercise of being present with yourself as on some level an infinite game. I think if you think of like past, future, and present, there's a lot of conversations in culture these days around like, I just want to be here. I want to be here now. I want to be present. I want to be now. And in contrast with, I'm lost in the past, maybe nostalgia or regret or something that's happened historically, or I'm tripping about the future and worried and fearful of what could be or whatever. And there's a sense in which people are trying to game their well-being and go like, I just want to get to a place where I'm okay. I'm good. And the irony is the easiest way to do that is to take whatever you want to learn from history and forget the future and persist in being in a present state, to being really fixated here. And ironically, when you're present, people who practice being present, it has a very expansive experience. It actually slows down time sometimes, and it actually gives someone a sense of transcendence, and there's more to them. There's substance to them. And this can sound like a little bit like science fiction-y language, but to the practitioner, this will sound resonant, that there's something infinite about being here now that isn't available if you're constantly worried about the past or freaked out about the future and trying to engineer things to win a moment. It's a very small existence. It's a very small game. And the opportunity, the gold, I think, is to orient our lives in such a way where we have a disproportionate bias towards infinite. And if infinite is a hard kind of category for people to understand, if you think of the difference between getting, doing, and being, like having, be, do, have, fixate on being. Being is an infinite game. Becoming is an infinite game. And there's never a linear binary moment where all of a sudden you've become and you're done. Or if there is, bless your heart, you're missing out.
But I think that's an important distinction because, part of this playing infinite is a reorientation or recalibration of our perspective. And it's also that perspective, or I guess the importance of recognizing that it's that be, do, have that are at tension or at play. And it's about that becoming piece. If you think about, we often talk, you've heard the expression, like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. We can often feel or kind of spiral out because we have such a, narrow view of what's going on, a narrow perspective in either the tasks that are at hand or the work that we're doing. And I think all this like relates back to the very first anchor of get to as well, because all these relate to each other, but when you're actually able to recognize these things as opportunities, as get tos, not have tos, it just helps you and better positions you to play infinite. It's easy to say, play infinite, see the bigger picture, be present. Like, what are some like practical things that we can do in our day-to-day lives in each of these moments to kind of help either put us in that position, in that posture, or like help recognize when we're not in that position?
When I'm in a state of fear or anxiety, those are kind of tells to me that there's something at stake that I could lose. And I think that's something to pay attention to. That probably is an indicator that you're playing by finite rules, even though you might be in an infinite game. So I think of folks who really suffer, like they're not making this up, really suffer from anxiety. They've practiced thinking that they're in trouble, like that if they don't shift or do something, everything's going to go sideways. And folks that can kind of navigate that anxiety, relate with it in such a way where you gain agency over it, where you acknowledge what you're experiencing and not are driven by it, and keep honing things down. Even for me, the pace of my voice, when I'm talking really fast, it's usually an indicator of some kind of insecurity, some kind of sense of, I'm at risk or something. And what I love about infinite games is everything is fine. Things are going to perpetuate, so you don't have to worry about losing something. In the same way that you might be overly concerned about wanting to win something. And again, for some people, this is a foreign concept. Like, all there is winning and losing. It's Darwinian. It's survival. It's, and I think for folks who have come from spiritual traditions that talk about transcendence and life even beyond this terminus that we're all facing, that invites a way of relating with the infinite. And the idea of like the possibility of infinite life is fascinating. I think a lot of folks, they think of it exclusively as like, what's going to happen after you die. But practitioners of the infinite game actually experience infinite life here, now, not in some future state. And actually, it actually offers a bridge to understand, I could see how this might actually happen, like extend even after our physical life ends. And again, this is probably of all the anchors that we talk about, this is probably the one that is the most esoteric or heady. But practically speaking, it becomes very accessible when we don't try to explain all the pieces. Just know that there are two kinds of games, finite and infinite. Finite, there's a winner and a loser. There's rules. You got to stay by. It's really critical that you play by those rules and honor the rules and recognize that your job is to win it at the cost of everyone else losing. It's a zero-sum game. It's a closed system. The open system of the infinite game is it never ends, even if you end, that it can perpetuate. And you can actually orient your whole existence in the direction of, I want that to be the most present thing to me. So practically, at MWOD, we have all these habits that you start your day with and you sustain your day with and you end your day with. And for the cynical, critical person outside of MWOD, they might look at it and go, that sounds pretty boring. And like you're in Groundhog's Day and you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And what they don't recognize is what we've actually created is an operating system. It's a structure on which we can gain agency and mastery and belonging within, that we can, in the midst of storms hitting us, we aren't that concerned about those storms. The storms hit us and We anticipate them, and they're difficult. It doesn't make them any less hard, but when they happen, we're not surprised. And as we persist with the immovable object that is our operating system, that is our practice, we put ourselves in a position of playing a fundamentally different game of existence. And now all of a sudden, the difficulty becomes training. Even we volunteer for difficulty to augment our training, to get ready for the storms that are coming. And we do that with very consistent activity, because it might seem like, oh gosh, one more day, but we're not trying to win our practice. We're creating a practice in order to play infinite. And in that context, all of a sudden, these seemingly silly little daily rituals or habits are more about who we're becoming. It's about our identity. This is why James Clear is so resourcefully identified that if you're going to take on a habit, don't just take on the habit of I want to run every day. Become the kind of person who doesn't miss a day of, like, become a runner. And runners run. They don't miss. This is what they do. And as a result, they extend the game. They push it forward. And not every game can be infinite, to be clear. Some things do come to an end, but a lot more can be perpetuated than we think. And if I have this framework in my mind, back to the example of my marriage, if my wife and I have an argument, it could be the end of the line, or it could be a great moment for me to grow in humility and understanding and perspective. I could actually go do some more thinking and considering, praying even. We didn't have an argument, but yesterday we had a conversation about a season my wife's going through and ways I could learn about the season that is and can go understand it. And she sent me a podcast about it, and I get to listen to it tonight. And I get to consider her and grow in my affection toward her. I'm on a flight tonight late, and I can't wait. It's so fun. Like I get to perpetuate that relationship. And if, let's say, I'm in that and she's doing that too, like with me, and we can keep the game playing and going in such a way that I grow, she grows, we grow. And what are we actually doing? Well, we're being really present to the moment at hand and not trying to gain leverage over the other, but actually trying to be with each other as we become new kinds of people.
Yeah, what you're saying about the presence and the richness that we get to experience when we play infinite games reminds me of, Peter Attia's book Outlive, and the kind of double entendre that is. He's specifically talking about, like our physical bodies and our health. And oftentimes when people hear outlive, they just think like outlive others. Like I'm going to live longer. But he's saying like,
I'm winning.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. He's saying, no, outlive, like in the moment, you live a better life. You have more life, not just in quantity, but in quality. And I think that's right. Really what playing an infinite game is about. It's not that you can go longer or run longer or endure. Sure, it's some of those things, but it's so you can live a better, fuller life, recognizing that you are playing this infinite game.
And
even playing it, it begets it.
Well, it begets it. That's right. And the experience of it kind of grows in caliber and quality. And it's funny, people who play the infinite game consistently, they rarely talk about it. It's almost like a distraction, and because it's so much easier to talk about the finite game than it is the infinite game. But the infinite game is one of it's like a noble act, and you can actually play finite games infinitely. So I think of like athletic metaphors are so resourceful in this regard. Like you think of people who just want to win a tournament, and others who are so committed to their craft that as they play the infinite game better and better, they happen to win a lot more tournaments. And that's not lost on me. And if they lose those tournaments, they don't seem to be quite as devastated by it. They have a sense of like extracting as much resource from the experience and setting themselves up to become someone new in the next round. And the invitation, I think, for folks is to really reflect on these ideas. But because finite games are so everywhere in our culture, I think it's more resourceful to go like, how could I approach whatever game it is that I'm in, or seeming game that I'm in, with a fundamentally different goal? If it wasn't as important for me to win, but more important, if I wasn't concerned with the outcome, but was more concerned with being in the experience, what would that open up for me? Recently, we've talked a little bit about Tim Galway's The Inner Game of Tennis. And I think this is fundamentally what he's getting at, is the idea of like, if you can be, he calls it relaxed focus. If you can be relaxed and ruthlessly focused on the point you're in, not even the game. Someone has served the ball and you're hitting the ball back in whatever game it is. If it's not tennis, it doesn't matter. But this is where it's still a game to be in relationship with somebody. If I can be relaxed with my wife and focused on my wife in the moment that I'm in, I've somehow gone to a new dimension called the infinite game. And I like that. That's a helpful way, very practical way, because I can do that everywhere all the time. I can do that in the middle of a CrossFit workout. I can do this in the middle of a meeting with my boss where I'm getting evaluated. I can do this on a podcast when I'm recording with my friend Mitch. I could be thinking about what's next. I could be thinking about what I missed this morning. There's so much that could be at hand. But where am I at my best? Well, when I'm present to this moment, relaxed, and really focused on this moment, like this play, and trust that when I get to the next one, it'll show up. And again, the radical irony in all of this is it does produce better results over time. Mm-hmm. Like the quality of people's experience of listening to a podcast, or of how I show up at work, or how I lead a project, improves when I fixate on the infinite game. Even though there are little finite games along the way. It's just like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, we won that. That's great. Let's get back to the becoming bit, because that's where the gold is. Yeah. And in context, get to, choose your role, fuel first, travel light, prioritize profit, correct course, and now play infinite. These begin to make sense because they kind of flow together. This all points in a sense. And next week's episode, when we talk about the final anchor, I think is even more of the pinnacle. But this kind of captures the essence of what why do we get to? Why do we choose a role? Why do we feel first? Why do we prioritize profit? All those things are an effort to play a bigger game.
Mm-hmm. And that bigger game will also inform whether you gain the benefits of those won or lost finite games too. Like you said.
That's right.
Like if you're playing the infinite game and you lose, quote unquote, a finite game, then you can still, like you said, for those that lose the matches or whatever, like you still can gain things from that, can still contribute towards your becoming, even if you didn't, win that match or that game. And I think that's where it doesn't necessarily work at gold.
I keep talking over you because I get so excited. Please forgive me. I must be insecure about something.
You're relaxed, but you're focused. Yeah.
But the other part that occurs to me as you're saying that is you could also win a finite game and gain no benefit in the infinite game.
Totally.
Outcome bias. I got the result I was hoping for, so therefore I must have become a good player. Not necessarily. You might have got lucky. Mm-hmm. They might have played poorly. And this is where I think some people would just prefer to have the result without the process. And that means they want the finite without the infinite. And it's unfortunate. I mean, it's funny. I just thought of this, my Rubik's Cube. Mm-hmm. And it's funny to me when I think about how, when it's a mixed up cube, how, when I was a kid, I wanted to desperately learn how to get the result of a cube that was complete. But I was so desperate that I just took the stickers off and cheated. Just changed. And I got the result I was looking for, but unbelievably not gratifying. I didn't like the result. It landed to me like what cheating always yields, which is a sense of like betrayal, right? But I got the result without the thing. But then when I learned how to solve the Rubik's Cube, it was a deep sense of like, no, I can do the cube, man. Like I got something that I couldn't have gotten otherwise. And It's funny. I'm trying to actually solve the cube while we're talking, so it would have a dramatic moment at the end, and I'm not sure if I can talk and do it at the same time. But there's a sense in which it's so much more gratifying when I can get to a place of becoming our person as opposed to just getting the result. And I'm not quite done, but I'm on my way. And I promise if we hung in this conversation longer, we'd get there. And I think that's what it comes down to is, do you want to become the person or do you just want the result? And if you literally, some people, they hear that and they're like, oh, well, I think what I'm hearing you say, like, I actually don't believe I could become the real article. The best thing I'm going to settle for is the result. And friends, the case I want to make is like, no, you can have it all. You really can. But to get it all, play the biggest game you can imagine. And that's what's going to get you to where you want to go.
I want to stall and talk to give you more time to solve this thing, but I think that's a great place to end the episode.
I think that's probably fair.
There's a whole group of us that are playing Infinite every single day, and of course, as a part of that, there are finite games. There are course corrections as we kind of strive for this, but we do it in the MWOD community, and I invite you, if you're listening to this, check it out. There's all of these anchors that we've been talking about and building towards this final anchor that we're going to be unpacking next week are things that are part of our identity, part of who we're becoming, part of something that we explore every single day. And we get to do all of these things, not just in our heads, but actually in an embodied practice. So you can learn more at MWOD.io/apply. And Dane, did you have any other final thoughts?
I was going to hold up the Rubik's Cube, but I don't need to. It's good.
Let's see it. You got to reward the people that are actually watching if you have it completed. If not, that's okay.
It's all right. I'm playing Infinite, bro. It's good.
Okay.
Leave the mystery right there. Right. Thanks, Mitch.
Well, thanks, Dane. Bye.
Men and Women of Discomfort is our membership community, and we are open to everyone. But keep in mind, our tagline is, it's probably not for you. If we're wrong about that, or if you want to find out for yourself, you can find us at MWOD.io.